All right, back for round two. I know at least Dave is in the chat there. If anyone else is there, just wave like Dave did. I really got to figure out, how do you get these things to stay over here? I don't know how to do that yet. All right, so going to try this again. Thanks again for showing up again. If you were already here before, hey, Steve, good to see you. There's a million things that can go wrong. Thanks, Nick, for coming back. Thanks, Jason, for coming back. For the sake of everybody, I'm going to do a brief re-intro, and then I'm going to try to do some of the stuff I'd planned before. So I open... Oh, and Glenn's here now, too. This is good. So the story I want to open with is about my son, Liam, who is just gone into the 4th grade and is having a hard time reading. And Liam is one of those kids, he's our youngest of 4. He's one of those kids that a lot of things have come easy to him. He learned how to swim by himself. He learned how to ride a bike way before any of our other kids. He is naturally quite athletic. But whenever he encounters something that he can't get right away, whenever he's not good at something right away, he basically gives up. If it's not within his natural grasp, the idea of working for something, practicing at something, improving every single day is really tricky. And reading for him is something that he didn't get right away. And he's having to learn right now that some things in life just take a long time. They take continuous improvement over and over and over again. And so he's in a really difficult way. Every day we're almost forcing him to practice like 20 minutes of reading a day, even though it's hard, even though he doesn't know the sounds yet. And the idea being that over a long period of time, he's going to improve a little bit every day, and eventually he will learn how to read. But it's painful. It's painful in the here and now. Even for me as a parent, it's painful. I have these thoughts of like, is he ever going to get there? Is he going to improve? Is he ever going to be able to read? And it's only when I take the long view that I'm encouraged, because I can see, well, he's definitely not at a 4th grade reading level, but maybe he's at a grade 2 reading level now. And before he was, not even on the charts. So the long range view shows me that he's improving bit by bit. And I'm thinking about how this applies to us as makers. And, some of us are trying to build a business. Some of us are trying to, create something, whether that's a book or software. And I think, at least for myself, sometimes I fall into that same trap of when things are painful right here and now, it makes me want to give up. And it's hard to see the long-range view. I want to start by playing this clip that Jamie introduced me to. Jamie in the Mega Maker Club. It's an interview with Annie Duke. She is a researcher that basically researched professional poker players, ended up becoming a professional poker player. And this interview she did with Farnham Street, you can listen to the whole thing on the Farnham Street podcast, is really great. I'm going to start by just playing a piece of that.
I think that the thing that gets in the way of most learning, and I think that you can see this pretty clearly at the poker table, is something that you said. which is the pain. So it's this double-edged sword. It's like a catch-22. You need the pain in order for it to matter to you so that you'll learn. But the pain actually gets in the way of learning. And why is that? Because when you're losing, it just lights your limbic system up. I mean, it does not feel good to lose. And what particularly doesn't feel good about losing, when you're playing in a game or doing anything where you could possibly attribute your losing to your own decisions. So these are decisions you've made based on your mental model of the world, based on the beliefs that you have, that we view as an attack on our identity.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear that. You were able to hear that. I think this whole idea of, the pain, you experience the pain, your limbic system lighting up, and this idea that it doesn't feel good to lose. This is the same thing that my son is hitting up against. He hates to lose. And so regardless of what it is, if he can't win, he doesn't want to play. And again, as a parent, I can see that's so ridiculous. I can see that if he continues that attitude, that he will have a really hard time in life. But on the other hand, me as a maker or an entrepreneur or whatever I am, a creative person, sometimes I run into that same thing where I feel like if I launch something and it doesn't succeed right away, or I invest in something that doesn't work out, there's part of me that just wants to throw up my hands and go, well, forget about it. I'm not going to even bother. And I think if I had a parent above me as a 38-year-old adult now, I think they would say the same thing I say to my son, which is you can't think that way. If you're going to play a game, you have to be willing to lose. And this is something that poker players actually figure out is, often when they're losing, they're figuring out strategy. They're figuring out what not to do. I know that there's certain folks that, play video games who are really good at hacking games, like figuring out how to beat them really quickly, speed runners and things like that. And, when you and I play a video game, at the arcade, or even if we're playing a game for the first time amongst friends, our initial goal is just to win, right? We just want to win or stay alive as quickly as possible. And I don't know if you've tried playing Fortnite yet, but that's been kind of my experience. I get in and I'm just trying to stay alive as long as I can. But often people that are good at hacking the system, they're okay with losing. They're okay with dying a bunch of times on a certain level if it helps them figure out a strategy, if it helps them get the lay of the land. And so they don't fear losing. What they fear is not learning. Let's see if I can set this next clip up here. Hold on here. This is the second part, another part of that same interview. Let's just add another movie here. So, yeah, this is Annie Duke talking about how we need skin in the game.
I think that the thing that gets in the way of most learning, and I think that you can see this pretty clearly at the poker table, is something that you said, which is the pain. So it's this double-edged sword. It's like a catch-22. You need the pain in order for it to matter to you so that you'll learn. But the pain actually gets in the way of learning. And why is that? Because when you're losing, it just lights your...
Oh, sorry. It's the same one. Hold on. Let me try to get the actual... How come that didn't work? New media movie overlay. see if this works. Well, I spoke too soon, didn't I? David was saying I should create a thing that teaches people how to avoid all these things. Here we go. No, I'm not hearing it. Why is that? Are you folks not hearing that now? Because now I'm not hearing it. Choose file. Here we go.
So we just default to attributing it to luck because there's an element of skill and luck here, and that way we can mentally get off the hook.
Well, that's basically what ends up happening. So the pain is the double-edged sword. We need the pain. We need skin in the game. We need the skin in the game in order to learn in this particular case. But it's that very fact that you're losing, maybe because of your own decisions, that doesn't feel good to us, that makes us feel like our identity is being attacked. So now we have a choice. We can say, well, in the long run, I have to take the pain because my long run goal is to become a better player and to learn. By the way, whatever it is, whether it's poker or sales or business or relationships or, ordering better food at a restaurant, going to the gym, whatever it might be. We have to be able to say, okay, I'm willing to take this short-term pain, this feeling that doesn't feel very good, because I know in the long run it's going to help me learn, because I'm going to go in and I'm going to examine my decisions. I'm going to see where maybe I could have improved, where I could have made a better decision that would have increased the likelihood that I had a better outcome. So I'm going to trade that off. I'm going to take that short-term hit. But in the long run, I'm going to feel better about myself, and I'll obviously have a more positive narrative of my life story over the long run if I'm willing to do that. Or that choice two is, I don't want to feel pain right now. And it seems like people really take that discount.
So, this whole interview, I was really thankful that Jamie shared it with the group, because it feels like this is it. This is this idea of we have two choices. We can take this long range view that if we are going to be makers, if we are going to be creatives, if we're going to be building a business, if we are going to be bootstrappers, whatever it is that we are committing ourselves to, this is going to have to be a long-term game. And the alternative is this short-term view, which is, well, if I can't win right now, then it doesn't matter, or then it's not worth doing. Or even maybe having peace in the storm, where, for me, I'm not having as good of a year business-wise as I was last year. And in this moment, I could say, well, I could start freaking out, basically. And for sure, there's lots of times I freak out. But I could be feeling like, okay, I gotta, scramble. I've got to, I don't know. I feel like a lot of mistakes are made when you have a short-term perspective. But if I can feel like, you know what, this is a long-term game I'm playing. And so, to continue the poker metaphor, maybe I've lost a bunch of hands lately. But what can I learn from this? And yeah, it's painful. But we have to be able to take the pain if we're going to grow. We have to be able to take the discomfort if we're going to grow. And it's definitely not easy. It's not like being an employee. Even some of the lessons we might have learned when we were consulting or in paid employment, some of that prepares us for now. But if you are an independent maker, or if you are trying to create a side business, or you are, even just trying to build anything and put it out into the world, it's almost like nothing can prepare you for that until you commit yourself fully to that thing. And then you go, okay, well, this might take 5, 10, 15 years to grow. And even then, in 5, 10, 15 years, you'll probably still feel like you haven't arrived. It's the short-term perspective versus long-term. Let me create another movie here. This one is a Casey Neistat clip. And I think this is a good place for us to sneak this in. And by the way, folks, if you have thoughts or questions or comments as this is going on, please put them in the chat. That makes for great kind of commentary while we're going here. And also, if you want to add me on Skype, Industry Justin, all one word, and you want to jump on at the end here to talk about this, I think that'd be great. Okay, so here's the Casey Neistat quote.
Okay, let's end this podcast with a quote that's relevant to that question from one of my favorite people in the world. She passed away a few years ago. Her name was Lillian Vernon. Google her. A fascinating woman who I had the pleasure of knowing. She was the richest woman I'd ever met. And I was very broken. She was very, 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 very rich. And I asked her once about money. And she said to me in her amazing, sweet, kind, and totally non-judgmental tone, she was like, "Sweetheart, let me tell you about money. Money is round. You never have it. But sometimes it rolls to you, and sometimes it rolls away from you." And that stuck with me so much because it is so true. No one gets to hold on to their money. And there are times where it just slips away from you and it rolls over to someone else. And that's the whole quote. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. That makes sense, right? What it meant for me is when I was at my brokest, which was very recently, it was right after I started Beam, I just had the confidence that it's just rolled away from me right now and I'll figure out how to get it to roll back. That gave me confidence.
So there's a few things I like about this quote. The big thing actually is I didn't know that Casey says when he was at his most brokest, it's not really a word, but right after he started Beam. And in my mind, it's like, no, Casey's successful. He's got lots of money to burn and he starts Beam and he's good. He has lots of margin. He has lots of padding in his life. But it sounds like he started Beam and that was a major risk for him, a major sacrifice. And, sometimes I think, especially for me, I like to think about folks that maybe were dealt a better deck or now have had a better deck for a while. Folks that have built up whatever it is, money or influence or whatever. And think, oh, okay, well, they've got it made. They've got the deck is stacked in their favor now. And even if, like Casey, he started from nothing. He was a high school dropout, got his girlfriend pregnant, ran away from home at 16 with nothing. But once people get to a certain level, it's easy for us to go, well, they've got it made now. And anything that they do is going to, they're fine. But here he is saying, well, no, I still felt broke in that moment. I had invested all this money and it had gone away from me. And I had this feeling like, okay, maybe it'll come back. And obviously there's some tension here between real life and going the distance. It's something I've been trying to explore, on my podcast and in my blog, talking about, how can we as makers go the distance when we're making something? How can we, if you're bootstrapping, how can you survive while you're building that thing? And it just feels like this reinforces this long range view that we can't just be thinking about, this one little moment in time. We have to think, are we committed to this for the long haul? And if we are committed to this for the long haul, are we willing to invest the 5, 10, 15 years that it's going to take to grow to the point where we get to the next level? I think, does this show my screen? Oh, it shows the wrong one. Need to show this one. This idea of fortitude, courage in pain or adversity, the ability to kind of endure something when you're down. This is exactly what I think Annie Duke is talking about when she's saying, when you're down and you're playing poker, you can't get so down on this idea that you just lost a hand. You can't get so down on this fact that, everything didn't work out for you. You have to have this long-range view that this is just one hand. This is just one game. I'm going to lose some games, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. I'm going to improve my strategy. I'm going to improve my skills. I'm going to improve all the things I'm going to need to get to the next level. And then I'm going to keep working at it and working at it and working at it. It's probably a good time to do the next Annie Duke quote to set this one up. This is what Jamie was interested in talking about in the first place, which was this quote is about what are called bad hand stories. I think, is it bad hand story? Yeah, bad hand stories in poker. Meaning, every poker player has this time where they've got an incredible hand and they're just waiting to play it. They know they've won the round. And then the opposing player, by pure chance, is able to beat them. And that's called a bad hand story. And what poker players love sharing these stories. It's like about the fish that got away. They love to talk about how unlucky they were, or how another competitor just got lucky and that's why they were successful. And Annie's mentor, a poker player at the top of his game named Eric, he talks about this. So let me set this up here. Set a new scene. Call this one Eric, and we'll play this one here. It's called, these are called bad beat stories. Sorry. So bad beat stories are these stories where you complain about having lost, about having a win stolen from you.
What he said was, I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something like, why are you telling me this story? Like, do you think I really want to hear this? Like, okay, I've lost with a lot of hands too. I have heard so many bad beat stories. I have no interest in yours whatsoever. If you really lost because of bad luck, what's the point of the story? There's nothing that you can learn from it. Now, if you have a question, like if you want to talk about strategy, like I don't care whether you won or lost a hand. Like we'll sit down and talk about strategy, but don't just come up and tell me about bad luck. You're like literally wasting my time and it's annoying.
Now, I'm not sure if that audio played, so I'm going to wait to hear what you folks say. Sometimes those other videos worked great, and now, oh, great. Perfect. Good. Just didn't play for me on my side. So, wow, there's so much to talk about here. I love telling bad beat stories in the bootstrap maker sense. I love talking about how other people won because of luck, and that can be true. I think there is tension between these ideas that we need to keep in mind, but Eric Seidel's point is that these bad beat stories don't actually help. They don't. Telling these stories, there's nothing we can learn from them. Because if it's all about luck, if it's all about bad luck, then what's the point? Right? Is my audio's on? Right. If it's all about bad luck, what's the point? What's the point of the story? There's nothing you can learn from it. So if we're going to tell stories, if we're going to read stories, if we're going to listen to advice, all we want to be concerned about is what can we learn from this? How can this improve our strategy? How could this improve us 1%, 2%, 3% today? And then tomorrow, another 1%, and then the next day, another percent, so that, again, in 5 years, we can have this long-term improvement. Just want to pause here because I see some of you are leaving comments, and I just want to make sure that I get to those. Okay, so Val was just saying that this is very similar to tennis because you lose and win a lot of points along the way, and you make a lot of inevitable mistakes. So you learn how to focus on the new point regardless, but you keep the lessons that you learned. Yeah, so I think there is quite a bit of kind of sports analogy in here. Just like, again, my youngest son gets upset now because he's not the best soccer player on the team, because in the early days, he was able to be the best player on the team just because of, innate physical ability. He could run faster, he could score more goals, but he wasn't willing to do the hard work of learning the skills and practicing, listening to the drills. And now he's fallen behind. Now he's not the star player. And it makes him not want to play anymore. And again, obviously, I've got a lot to work with Liam because I want him to gain this fortitude of being able to work hard on something, practice something, and make it through that low time, that dip, that the friction of, man, this is hard, and I'm not getting any positive feedback, right? That's the hard thing. Don't keep doing what's not working, Liam. We gotta work on your practicing, your passing. We gotta work on, your fundamentals before you're going to score more goals. So yeah, I think that's great. Raphael has a couple books. Never Go Back, 10 Things You'll Never Do Again by Dr. Henry Cloud. And then these chapters here were especially helpful. So this is good. Thanks for jumping in. I think there's also, on the flip side, if there are bad beat stories, there are also positive beat stories that are just as destructive. And if a bad beat story kind of attributes a loss or a mishap to bad luck, a good beat story, and it's kind of like a very short-term perspective, right? Well, I didn't win because of bad luck. A good beat story has the same potential for not being helpful, but it has the same short-term view, but it gives us this lie that if we do what others have done in the past, what took them 5, 10, 15 years to do, if we do those things, we can shorten the road from 5, 10 years to 1 year or 6 months or a month or a week, right? So let's see if I can get this one. We'll call this one John Syracusa. And we are going to play this clip here.
The thing to avoid is Apple did a thing, thing was successful. Therefore, everything Apple did that led to that is a thing that you should do to be successful too. That's what every business book says, right? Which is the worst possible analysis. Because Apple operates in this way, and Apple was successful, you too should do these things, so then you'll be successful. It's like, well, all we have is this is the way Apple operates, and they were successful. But for all we know, Apple would have been 100 times more successful if they didn't operate that way. And the thing that made them successful was not this way of operating or this particular thing or the fact that they have, pizza on Tuesdays. And if you have pizza on Tuesdays, you'll make an iPhone.
All right. So I like this one. I think there is, yeah, it's interesting hearing this again. One thing I'm realizing more and more, actually, and this really kind of became real to me today. I was discussing all of this with this Aussie fellow in a coffee shop because he was talking about how, really it all comes down to our attitude. And I was kind of fighting back against that. But now so much of this is about us playing our own game. It's not about Apple's game and what they did to be successful. It's not about Nathan Barry's game and what he did to be successful. It's not about Elon Musk's game and what he did to be successful. It's also not about, all these other things we could blame for our success or non-success. Even though there are viable things that can stop us, and some of us have way more privilege than others. Those are all real. But it just kind of reinforces this point that I'm going to make, which is we're all playing our own game. We're not playing anyone else's game. And if that's true, that means the only thing we can do is focus on our game and not try to copy what someone else is doing and not try to follow the 10 rules to success that someone else has come up with in an effort to shorten the journey down from 10 or 15 years down to a week or a month. What worked for them isn't going to work for us. But at the same time, just because they found something that worked, we can't get bitter or sour about that, which I'm sometimes inclined to do. Where you just say, wow, they just got lucky. Their timing was right. They had better assets. They had better resources. There was no competition back then. All of that might be true, but it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the game we're playing right now. What game are we playing right now? Not even together. None of us are playing this game together unless you're co-founder with somebody. With Transistor, there's Libsyn and there's Simplecast and there's all these other folks. And we could pay a lot of attention to them. We could get bitter that they got so far ahead of us. Doesn't matter. We're in our own game. And it's almost like we're in this maze, and it doesn't matter if someone else seems to be further ahead of us in the maze than we are. We just need to keep focusing on how to get out of the maze. If all we focus on is how we feel like someone else is more advantaged because they're ahead of us, we're never going to get out of the maze. We just have to focus in the maze. We have to keep our head about us. We have to stay calm, even when it feels like we're down or we're losing or things aren't going our way. We have to think, okay, well, this is just a short-term perspective. This is this one piece of the maze. But if I'm going to get out of here, it's going to take a long time. And I need to just keep my wits about me so that I can make it to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage, right? Final clip I'll play for you is from Seth Godin's Akimbo podcast. So we'll call this one Seth. I'm labeling all of these for some reason. So let's get this clip here.
Often you'll hear an interviewer talking to an actor or someone with charisma about their gift. This person's really gifted, they'll say, or when did people realize you had a gift? Well, it turns out all of us have one gift or another, but that's not what makes someone a genius. That's not what makes someone productive or important or a contribution. No, it's the emotional labor they bring to the table. It's the willingness to go closer to the bone, to do the work that might not work, to show up when all bets are off. That emotional commitment, the emotional labor of doing the hard stuff, that is where genius actually lives.
This piece, I mean, this whole episode, it's just, if you search Seth Godin genius, the whole thing is great. You may have seen me play a separate clip from this same episode about, which I kind of like to refer to because it's all about him saying, listen, the 1976 NBA All-Stars couldn't even come close to competing with the 2016 or 2018 NBA All-Stars. Basketball players have gotten progressively better. And he says, well, why? Well, because the economics are better. You can be an NBA player and you can make millions of dollars. And so more people are willing to put in the practice and the hard work and the effort to become basketball players. It's not that we are birthing more people that are more athletically able, although some of that is true. You know, people are healthier, things like that. But on the whole, what's changed is the economics. And I was using that as an example of saying, well, there you go. See, it's so much harder now to start a SaaS business. You know, for Brian Hogg, it's so much harder to start a plugin business for WordPress. For David Sedia, it's so much harder to write a programming book now because there's so many other people doing it. I missed my chance. But that's not Seth's point at all. That's the context for this next part, which is just to say, okay, well, this is the game now. And what are we going to do about it? What good does it do to complain that we're not in 1976 anymore? It doesn't do us any good. None of us have a time machine. We can't go back. None of us can go back to 2001 and build Basecamp before Basecamp built it, right? We could try, but we can't do that. All we can do is the emotional labor that Seth is talking about here. It's the willingness to go closer to the bone, to do the work that might not work. Are we willing to do work right now that might not work in an effort to improve, to get better, to, play this long-term game? And it does beg the question why we're doing it at all. Because it really seems like it would be easier to go and get a job, but then we go back to the why we're doing this in the first place. Why are we doing this in the first place? Do I really want to be a bootstrapper? Do I really want to make software? Like, is that my end game? No. We're doing this because we want freedom. We want purpose. We want to, have a better life. We want to have a better life for our kids. Or this is what we have to do. We can't not do this. And I'm not saying that none of us should ever go back and get a job, because, if I have another bad year, I'll need to get a job. There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying that that's, sometimes that's just how life works out. having a long range view of our life and what we want is kind of what I'm trying to say. So if what you want is stability for you and your family, emotionally, and in terms of a regular paycheck all the time, then you should go out and find the most regular job that you can, because the most secure regular job that you can. And that's fine. And you would still be welcome inside of Mega Maker Club, and you would still be, we could still hang out. You can still be a maker even if you're working full time. I know a guy that has a course that does $200,000 a year. It's funny even just talking about how much money people make, and he still works full time for Airbnb. So he loves his work with Airbnb, but he loves teaching this course at the same time. And, but his long range view of what he wants out of life, that's what he's going after. And if we're going to accomplish those things, the reasons we're here, the reasons we're doing what we do, we have to be willing to say, okay, this is going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of emotional labor. It's going to be hard work. It's not going to happen overnight. I might fail today and have to get up tomorrow and try something else. I'm going to stay calm even when I've been dealt a bunch of bad hands. That's the key. And I don't exactly know how I'm going to do that, because I'm like you, and it's hard figuring all this stuff out. But I thought I would share it anyway, even though I'm nowhere near as stoic as, all these clips would encourage me to be. It's something I want to strive for. I want to be able to stay calm in the moment and really just focus on improving every single day. Not worrying about someone else's journey, not worrying about what other people will think about me, not worrying about anything else except for, this is my journey, this is my game, and it looks different than Jason Fried's, and it looks different than Ashley Baxter's. It's different. So how can I focus right now on this game? And I think what's great about what we've been able to create in the Mega Maker Club is this community of people that can encourage each other, that can remind each other, that can help us zoom out when we can't see the forest through the trees, and can say, hey, listen, think about where you were, Justin, in 2007, working for a nonprofit and, not enjoying the work at all, and wondering if you'd ever be able to get work that, paid your bills and that you enjoyed. Or think about where you were in 2013, 2014, where you're driving, 2 to 3 hours a day commuting and listening to Rob Walling on the podcast and feeling like, oh man, if I could ever even be close to that, my life would be made. The long range view gives you perspective about how far you've come or how much you've learned. And so my hope for us is that in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, as we continue to grow, as we continue to build on what we're doing now, we'll be able to see, again, everyone's journey is going to be different. Everyone's results are going to be different. But I think if all of us can look back and say, you know what, I've grown a ton since October 1st, 2018. I think that's worth working on. That's worth working towards. I think that's all I had to say. Is anyone still there? Yeah, I think Brenn's saying we make this excuse not to try new things. All the people that came before us were trying new things. Basecamp was breaking new trail. you know, Nathan Barry to get ConvertKit, you know, it took him 3-4 tries to get that to work. And the point isn't also that we should look at what Nathan did and then go, well, let's just, you know, replicate what he did and then maybe we'll win too. No. Oh, thanks, Steve. Yeah. I don't want us to embrace failure. No, I want us to embrace learning. I think that's the key. I want to embrace learning. And I want to, in some ways, this is why I've been willing to try Patreon. And if I'm completely honest, I'm kind of on this precipice of, do I commit myself fully now to trying to grow my Patreon thing? Do I try to do that? The idea being, I want to do writing and videos and stuff like this, podcasts for a long time, regardless of whether I'm doing Transistor or another business or a job. And so do I want to invest in having a community of people who want to support that work? And that's a big risk. And part of me goes, well, no one's ever really done that before. And, you know, maybe that's not worth doing. And maybe it's not. But I forced myself to try it out because I felt like trying new things, like Brian was saying, is part of the game. I have to be willing to try something. And just like anything else, it's not like I launched my Patreon and all of a sudden everything was fine. If I'm going to do that, it's going to take time and investment to grow that too. But maybe that's worth doing, right? Over the long haul. You know, if I'm able to make even $1,000 a month on Patreon on top of everything else that I do, that will be a huge weight off my shoulders as we grow Transistor over the long haul. And really, that's my whole goal is I just want purpose, I want freedom, and I want relationships. So if I get to keep building things with John Buddha, it's worth it for me to try Transistor if that helps me to do that. If I get to keep my freedom, if I don't have to go work at a coffee shop, it's worth trying these new things and not just expecting a quick win, but growing them over time so that in 5 years, maybe I'm making $5,000 a month on Patreon if I stick with it, if it seems like it's worth doing. And, then that feels worth doing. Of course. And the difficulty with all of this stuff is knowing if you're on the right path, if you're investing in the right things, you know, that's hard, but that's part of the game. And we almost have to look at it like it's fun. So maybe it ends up being a mistake, but if I learn something from it and I learn something new, then it's worth doing. I'm really talking myself into this right now. Maybe this is bad, but the other reason I really wanted to do Patreon is that I've always avoided building on top of someone else's platform. But as I look at other people who have had success, and again, maybe it won't work for me, but one of the tenets of success seems to be, oh, hey, I saw someone give me a thumbs up. How does that work? You can thumbs up and I see it in here? That's cool. People often have to, it's almost like regardless of what you're doing, you can't just build the whole platform yourself. You have to be willing to hitch a ride onto something else. And in a sense, we're all doing that with the internet. The internet is the platform. You know, that's what we build on top of. Taylor Otwell built on top of PHP and did Laravel. Steve and the folks at Breaker are building on top of the podcast ecosystem. Brian Hogg is building on top of the WordPress ecosystem. And so I saw this ecosystem and I thought, well, maybe I'll just try it because unless I try it, I'll never know. And I can't just take other people's word for it. Sometimes you just have to try it yourself. And again, there's tension between all of these things because you don't always want to learn things the hard way. Like there is some wisdom, collective human wisdom, but there are also times where you just have to try it out yourself and see how it goes. Cool. Thanks, Brian, for showing up. Yeah, I think thinking backwards is helpful. Jason, I think your struggle is very common. Yeah, how can we put that in perspective? I don't know, because maybe I'm wasting my time with Patreon. How can we come up with a framework for that? I mean, I think one thing that was helpful for me is realizing, like when I did, let's see if I can find this. Sorry. Maybe this will be helpful. So this conversation Adam Wathen and I were having, where I'm asking, do I even want to be a bootstrapper? And Adam goes, well, no, what you probably want to do is make awesome stuff people are happy you made and get to do it without stressing about money. And so there's kind of two pieces to that. Make awesome stuff people are happy we made. And on the second part is getting to do it without stressing about money. And so what was helpful to me, Jason, is, and maybe I'll just put your thing back on screen here so folks can see this. But what was helpful to me was making this list here. What have I made that people are happy I made? And the list looks like this. This article, this is a web page. People email me about this all the time. And it's just something that people are happy I made. The podcast I've hosted, I get folks saying, that show you're doing is really making a big difference to me. Some of the books and courses I've made, like Marketing for Developers, people are saying, I'm happy you made this. Speaking at MicroConf and Laracon, those are things people seem to be happy that I've done. And at the same time, they're also things I really enjoy doing. Like these are things I want to keep being able to do. Mega Maker Club is for sure one of the things I'm most happy that I've contributed to. It's the longest running thing I've done. And now building Transistor with John. Well, what are the common elements of this? There's a lot of this is content. A lot of this is, even look what I'm doing right now. Like, I love this. I love going live. I love speaking on a microphone. I like hashing ideas out and putting them out into the world. And so hopefully this is going to get helpful here. It's been helpful for me to think about, okay, what are the things that I've done that have resonated over a long-term view? I started podcasting in 2012. I started blogging in 2008. So there's like 10 years there. And over that 10-year span, I can say, what have I done that people are happy that I did and that I was also happy to do? And if those are the things that people are happy I made and that I was happy to do, how can I create the means to do that in the future? And so for me, it's like, okay, well, if I want to continue to do that, I need to figure out the means. Maybe it's Patreon, and Patreon seems to work well with people that are creating content. So I'm going to try it out. I'm going to get back to your question because I feel like I'm not completely addressing it. Yes. So how do we know if we're not wasting our time? Well, we don't really until we put things out in the world. But, it's a lot of these things were just things I was trying over time. You got to think of it less of, to write a good weekly blog post, it's like 20, 30 minutes a day. So it's not like I'm talking about investing 8 or 10 hours a day into something that's not going to work. I'm saying, for 10 years, I've been investing 20, 30 minutes a day to write a blog post that goes out every week. And after 10 years of doing that, there's a handful of those things I've written or podcasted about or made videos about that have resonated with folks. And, it took that 10 years of doing things continuously that made the difference. I'm not sure if that is clicking, but I don't think it needs to be a big investment of time today. I think it needs to be a 10, 15 minute investment of time today, and then another 10, 15 investment tomorrow. So if you were going to start a podcast, for example, you would put out an episode this week, and then you would put out an episode the next week, and you would keep going. And at the very least, hopefully you enjoyed the process so much and you felt like you learned so much and you grew so much that it was worth doing regardless of whether you got paid or not. And, I'm going to continue to write no matter what. I think I will be empowered to write more and better stuff if I have people who are supporting my writing. So, but to get there, I realize it's not going to be, I started in 2008 and I'll probably have to keep going to make more of that happen. Val says, I heard someone say, if you worry, you are putting worry up on the high chair. You should put your hopes, dreams, goals, and plans up on the high chair. There's only room for either or on the chair. Yeah. I think that what really clicked for me today was this idea of when a poker player is losing a hand, they can't immediately start stressing out and getting anxious over this one hand that they lost and be like, well, it's all over. I'm never going to win a hand again. They can't think like that. They've got to stay grounded and breathe and focus on the fundamentals, focus on the strategy, focus on the things that they know are true, and just work on the next hand bit by bit. You grow your kind of poker earnings over time by winning more hands than you lose, but you're going to lose hands. The best poker player in the world has lost probably thousands of hands. And so, we might try one startup that doesn't work, or we might create a feature that doesn't work, but we're still in the game. Whew. Well, this was fun. I didn't even check Skype to see if anyone messaged me and said, I got to jump in here. But I got like 100 text messages from my wife. Okay, I need to be home in 2 hours. I still got time. And let me just check Skype. Did anyone contact me? Doesn't look like it. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for staying late. If you want me to keep doing these, just give the video a thumbs up, and I will try to do more of these live streams just for Mega Maker Club members and patrons on Patreon. I'm not even sure if anyone from Patreon joined this time. I still, how many I have? I only have a few. Oh, Patreon's down. Great. I think I have 10 patrons. But yeah, thanks everyone for being here. And if you have any other thoughts, let me know.